In today's Black Clover video, we discuss whether Julius Novachrono could be possessed by the Time Devil. In the latest Black Clover chapters, Julius Novachrono has once again shown signs of a very strange connection to the Clifford tree. We may learn the truth about Julius very soon. Many people are still having trouble deciding if Julius is good or perhaps secretly plotting something evil. This video is the ultimate guide to the Julius Novachrono Time Devil Theory that will help you to form your own personal opinion on the subject. We show literally everything you need to know about this topic, from Nacht's involvement to Julius' possible goal. Also, only a small percentage of the people who watch our videos are actually subscribed, so if you end up liking this video, consider subscribing. Please enjoy this video, let's go! Yuki Tabata created Julius Novachrono with one goal in mind: to confuse the fandom with a single question that could change the entire plot of Black Clover. Is Julius Novachrono in contact with one of the three rulers of the underworld, the Time Magic Devil? This confusion is not only evident in Black Clover, with several hints that he might actually be in contact with the Time Devil, but also in Mythology. Yuki Tabata has played very strategically with the references for Julius Novachrono so that we will always end up in a dead end when trying to find a solution. Is Julius the evil devil host, a reference to the Titan Kronos, who represents the destruction of time, arguably one of the most evil beings in Greek mythology? Or is Julius the mysterious hero who can see into the future, the powerful god Kronos who embodies time in Greek mythology? As you can see, mythology makes this problem even worse. Or maybe we even have two time devils. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that the last Clifford position called Thaumiel is represented in demonology by twin devils, which opens the possibility of two time devils, good and evil. Here we must remember that it is only confirmed that Lucifer is one of the three devils from the last gate, but it is not confirmed which of the three positions belong to which of the three rulers of the underworld. There are so many possibilities. Perhaps Julius could represent the god Kronos and the Time Devil could represent the evil Titan Kronos. So how can Julius Novachrono be connected to the Spade Kingdom, the devils, the Clifford, and basically the entire plot, assuming that he could be possessed by the third ruler of the underworld, the Time Devil? Since our last video about Julius, many things have changed in Black Clover, so let's talk about it. We basically know next to nothing about Julius' life before he met Yami and William about 17 years ago. That was shortly after Lucifer learned about the possibility of manifesting his own body in the human world without having a contract with a human. He found this out because he met Liebe, who was able to pass through the gate to the underworld. Julius Novachrono then suddenly showed a great interest in Yami Sukehiro and William Vengeance, both of whom were the solution to how the devils could leave the underworld, using Yami and William as the source of the Clifford, the Tree of Death. That same year, he went to see the two and insisted that they join his squad. That Julius could have met one of them by chance is believable, but that he should have met both of them at the same time right after Lucifer talked about this whole thing with the devils in the living world sounds very suspicious and could have been systematically planned. Then about 10 years ago, Julius Novachrono was appointed Wizard King and made Yami and William captains of their own squads. Yami offered his old best friend Nacht, a devil host and head of the Fausts, a family devoted to the study of demonology, to become vice captain of the Black Bulls. Shortly after Nacht's brother Morgan died, Julius sent Nacht to the Spade Kingdom to spy for him. This is very important to this topic and we will go into more detail a little later in this video. Julius, already suspected of being the devil host for one of the three rulers of the underworld, the Time Devil, sent the devil-possessed head of the Faust family to spy on the Zogratis family, who also have devil knowledge and are possessed by two of the remaining rulers of the underworld, the devil of gravity magic and the devil of space magic. This sounds so obvious that there might actually be a connection. The fact that Julius chose Nacht for this task cannot be a coincidence. And although no spy is known to have ever worked for the Dark Triad in the Clover Kingdom, the Dark Triad still had all the information about William and Yami, their first and last names, their magic, and even their past, as well as all the information about the events that took place in the Clover Kingdom, such as the reincarnation of the elves. The only known person who has been able to travel constantly between the Spade and the Clover Kingdom for several years without being caught was Nacht, who as mentioned was sent by Julius Novachrono himself. It's always about Nacht and Julius. However, we must keep in mind that if one of them did not tell the truth, that the other one is not to be trusted 100%. And the fact that Julius pretended not to know that Nacht was possessed by devils, although this was obviously the reason why Julius chose Nacht to go to the Spade Kingdom, is a clear indication that Julius lied. And we must therefore assume that Nacht did not tell the whole truth either. Moreover, we must consider that Julius has always known about the existence of devils, but did not warn anyone and pretended that he did not know that Asta was possessed by a devil, or that the Spade Kingdom was ruled by devils. Julius Julius pretended he did not know what the 5-leaf clover meant, pretended he didn't understand what language Asta's grimoire was written in, but the fact is that Julius Novachrono, at the time when Asta joined the Magic Knights 2 years ago, most likely already knew about the devils and about Asta and his magic. We know this because Nacht has confirmed that he most likely watched Asta as a kid. We saw this scene in the manga when Nacht knelt down in front of Asta and told him everything about his life. He said that he was watching over him. He went on to say Asta was born without magic and then became possessed by a devil. In the background, we see Asta's whole life since he was a child. It can't be a coincidence that Nacht was spying for Julius in the Spade Kingdom and at the same time watching Asta, who's supposed to be the key to defeat all the devils. That's like Julius randomly inviting Yami and William to join his squad, but at the same time not knowing that both of them are the source of the Cliffith. There must be some connection between Julius and Nacht in the context of Yami, William and Asta Liebe. The fact is that the Dark Triad not only knew who to capture, but also knew exactly where Yami and William were, without ever having been in the Clover Kingdom before, besides maybe Vanica, but Vanica too was far outside the capital. In particular, the ever-changing location of the Black Bull's base is difficult to find, as the base has been moved several times in the last 6 months. Nevertheless, Dante knew exactly where the Black Bulls was located. Dante didn't find his way to the Black Bull's headquarters by sensing Yami's mana or ki, because when he got there, Yami wasn't even there, knowing full well that this was the most likely place he could find Captain Yami, Sukehiro. The same was the case for Zenon and the Golden Dawn base. Both knew exactly where they could find their targets. We also know that Nacht arrived suspiciously late at the Clover Kingdom, when with his magic he could have easily arrived in time to get Yami and William to safety before they were even kidnapped, especially considering that he received the information about the ritual at the same time that Yami and William were attacked, perhaps even a few moments before the attack. Any other normal vice captain would have immediately teleported to the Clover Kingdom to prevent the kidnapping and thus avoid the creation of the ritual in the first place. But as we know, Nacht is definitely not a normal vice captain. Not to mention that Nacht has been spying for the Clover Kingdom for about 8 years and hasn't even given a single hint that Yami and William might be in danger, or Julius just hid everything, which makes everything even worse. But the fact is that one of them, maybe even both of them, have their secrets. However, Nacht is definitely not evil, which we can confirm from his inner monologues. But we know that Nacht supports the principle of necessary evil. We also know that Nacht has never shown any interest in working for the Magic Knights. However, after the death of his brother Morgan, he suddenly found himself in contact with Julius Novachrono and was then sent to the Spade Kingdom. And here's the very important thing that many people overlook. Some assume that Nacht became a Magic Knight to make up for his sins and fulfill his brother's dream. But that simply can't be the case, because when the Black Bulls asked Nacht why he became the vice captain of the Black Bulls even though he hates Yami and has no interest in the squad and its members, or the Magic Knights in general, he simply replied that the position of vice captain is very convenient for his own mission. So Nacht must have at least sensed that the Spade Kingdom must have something to do with the devils, and thus the devils must be of great interest to his own agenda for some reason. And based on the fact that he's doing this voluntarily, he most likely pursuing a goal of his own. So that means that either someone who knew what was going on in the Spade Kingdom must have told Nacht about it, or Nacht knew about the devils in the Spade Kingdom all along, because after all, he's the head of the Faust family. It is obvious that Nacht is a strategically interesting person for anyone who wants to create the Cliffith Tree. Nacht is one of the few people in the world who knows about the existence of devils, and he is trained in demonology. Nacht might also have a very private reason for being involved in such dark conspiracies if it means getting closer to his own agenda. We will come to that in a moment. So basically, Nacht was not sent to the Spade Kingdom because he wanted to become a Magic Knight, but his own desire to go to the Spade Kingdom made him a Magic Knight, because that was the only way Nacht could move freely between the two kingdoms without getting into trouble. The reason Nacht went to the Spade Kingdom must also have something to do with Morgan's death, because that was the turning point in his life. Everything that happened after that changed Nacht's perspective and his life goals. We know this because Nacht clearly stated that he didn't care if he died or not, so whatever goal he pursues in the Spade Kingdom must ultimately have something to do with his brother Morgan, because Nacht no longer has any other interest in living. Nacht may have found a way to bring back his brother Morgan, because there is a possibility that Morgan's soul now belongs to Lucifugus. We will put the link to this video in the comments. So perhaps Nacht could save Morgan by helping to create the Cliffith Tree and then performing some sort of necromantic ritual, for example. He might just want to save Morgan's soul just as Aesir's soul was saved so that Morgan could go to the afterlife. However, we know that Nacht never intended to open the first gate, so we can be sure that this was not the possible arrangement, yet it is undeniable that Nacht's actions indirectly caused the creation of the Cliffith Tree, as he did not bother to protect Yami and William nor warn the Clover Kingdom of any devil or danger in the Spade Kingdom. Moreover, Nacht chose exactly 3 days to prepare for the attack of the Spade Kingdom, exactly the time it took the Dark Triad to begin the actual ritual. Let's be honest, it would have been much easier to attack immediately when Yami and William were kidnapped, instead of waiting 3 days and giving the Dark Triad time to regenerate and begin the ritual. Vanica was already exhausted and Dante completely useless. The ritual was not ready yet. The moment Xenon returned to the Spade Kingdom was the moment they were most vulnerable. The 3 days had only one purpose: to learn a strategy that would help them defeat the Dark Triad when the ritual had already begun. But that strategy would not have been necessary in the first place if they had not waited 3 days. So instead of fighting Xenon and the weakened Vanica with a chance to free Yami and William before they got stuck in the ritual, then heal them and use them as reinforcement to defeat the Dark Triad for good, they decided to let the ritual begin and fight the full force of the Dark Triad while Yami's and William's life were already starting to disappear. Another reason they waited 3 days was of course that Nacht needed to train Asta, but that still doesn't explain why the remaining Magic Knights didn't attack the Spade Kingdom when the Dark Triad was literally at its weakest point. We know that Nacht didn't even take Asta after the 3 days, as he had promised, which means that Asta's training couldn't have been the main reason why they waited 3 days, because otherwise they could have easily waited a few more hours until Asta was actually ready. Instead, it really looks like it was important for Nacht to attack the Spade Kingdom at the exact moment the ritual began. If Nacht was really interested in making Asta the ultimate weapon against the Spade Kingdom and all the devils, he should have trained Asta much earlier and not at the last minute. He had more than 2 years to make Asta as powerful as he envisioned. The whole thing with Nacht and how he acted and planned everything seems very strange, especially his interest in Asta raises many questions. At the same time, we should not forget that Lucifero has also developed a great interest in Liebe. Now is it again a coincidence that Liebe ends up with the person who was being watched by Nacht, who spied on the Dark Triad, one of whom is possessed with Lucifero? A bit too many coincidences in Black Clover, don't you think? It is a fact that Lucifero said that one day he would return for Liebe, even though we know that the Clifford ritual is already used to open all the gates to the underworld, while Lucifero has found a way to be freed when the next gate opens. Liebe must still be somehow important to Lucifero's plan. Otherwise, the moment when Asta's mother died would become completely irrelevant, since she died only because Lucifero wanted to use Liebe's body, and the fact that Lucifero mentioned that he will come back for Liebe one day would no longer be important. So this aspect has to be relevant in the future. Perhaps there's another gate under the Clifford Tree that separates Satan from the underworld, as described in Demonology, so Lucifero could try to free the supreme ruler of the underworld, who was sent to the deepest place of hell where no light can reach. Before my partner Yami continues with this video, please take a short moment to like this video. Thank you.
If we take into account the fact that Julius and Nacht are working together, and we assume that Julius could also be possessed by the Time Devil, one of the 3 rulers of the underworld, it makes sense now that why Nacht suddenly started watching Asta, since Lucifero had such a great interest in Liebe. And as we know, the rulers of the underworld must most likely have contact with each other, since they literally live in the same layer of the underworld. Perhaps Nacht was somehow manipulated into believing that he was training Asta to be the ultimate weapon, but in reality, he indirectly got Asta to sign a contract with Liebe, so that Liebe would no longer be sealed in a grimoire. We remember that Liebe was safe from Lucifero all these years because he was sealed in a grimoire by Lycita. So now that Asta has made a contract with Liebe, Liebe is no longer safe from Lucifero. This possibility could be a direct connection between Julius, Asta, Nacht, Liebe, and Lucifero. But Nacht was not the only one watching Asta. Julius was also spying on Asta in some way, such as when he pretended to be this old woman in the black market, where it literally looked like Julius was testing Asta, or how he got Asta to go to the dungeon, where he then got his second sword. And most confusing of all, of course, are Julius's inner monologues, which always seems like he doesn't actually have any bad intentions. But then every time something happens, and that makes Julius suspicious again. However, we shouldn't forget that he doesn't have to have any evil intentions as long as there's a devil behind his actions who manipulates him. For example, by making him false promises. Julius always seems to be very friendly, but that doesn't change the fact that every one of his actions directly led to the creation of the Clifford. This only means that we do not understand the reason for all this, but not that Julius could have nothing to do with it. The personality of a character should never be used to determine their intentions. It could always be a mere facade or something we simply do not understand. We should not forget that devils tend to deceive and lie to mislead the people they do business with. The best example is literally the Dark Triad. Danica was used by Megicula for her own devil ritual. Lucifero literally left Dante, and it's likely that Beelzebub lied to Zenon about protecting the Spade Kingdom. So if there was a devil who contacted Nacht and Julius, we can safely assume that this devil could have manipulated them. If we now assume that this devil is indeed the third ruler of the underworld, the Time Devil, then it makes sense why and how Nacht came into contact with Julius Novachrono, thus explaining the reason why Nacht had shown a sudden interest in the Spade Kingdom. Even though he did not want to be a magic knight, nor did he want anything to do with Yami or the Black Bulls. Both the Clover and the Spade Kingdom have a deeper connection to the devils, and so there could be a possible collaboration between certain people. For example, Max's parents and the Zogratis family. The connection between the devils and the two kingdoms becomes clearer when certain aspects are considered. Number 1. In both kingdoms, there is a family dedicated to demonology. Although we have no confirmation that both families, the Zogratis and the Faust, were at any time in contact with each other or even shared a common goal. Nevertheless, we should not forget that both families were engaged in devil conjuration pretty much at the same time and tried to conjure high-level devils, even supreme devils. And supreme devils are definitely in contact with each other. So we can assume that at least the highest supreme devils know about the both Zogratis family and the Faust family. The Faust family, for example, has summoned Lucifugus, who is something like the Prime Minister or President of Hell. That is the head of the government and the most loyal of those who serve the three rulers of the underworld. Only a single Clifford Gate separates Lucifugus from the three rulers. So if the devils have the ability to communicate between the gates, which is very likely since the devils from the first gate told Lucifero from the last gate that Libe was able to enter the human world, then it is likely that Lucifugus would also able to tell the three rulers of the underworld about the demonologists from the Clover Kingdom. The demonologists are very important to the devils because they use them to make contracts and thus be present in the human world, as is the case with the Zogratis family. In addition to this, both kingdoms hid a demon god, which was then activated when the Clifford ritual began. The demon god in the Spade Kingdom was obviously prepared by the Dark Triad, but who could have prepared such a large demon god in the Clover Kingdom without anyone noticing? For me, well, someone only as powerful as a Time Devil comes into question. We know that Julius has the ability to freeze people with his time magic, even catch them in mid-air and hold them in a timeless zone until he releases them. How else could you explain a giant demon god suddenly appearing out of nowhere, literally from the sky? It could be a summoning spell, but someone must have prepared that too and activated the spell. So it's not unreasonable to assume that someone in the Clover Kingdom is working with the Dark Triad. If not Julius or Nacht, then someone else. Also, the location of the Clifford seems to be in the Spade Kingdom, and the Shadow Palace, the magical space between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead, seems to be in the Clover Kingdom. Both concepts can be used by the devils to be released from the underworld. While the Spade Kingdom has the three catalysts for the Clifford ritual, the Clover Kingdom has the two sources needed. Considering all this, it seems that the Clover Kingdom must be a very important strategic location for anyone who wants to create the Clifford tree. Imagine that you are part of a group of people who want to create a Clifford ritual. Then the first thing that you should consider is having a presence in the Clover Kingdom and keeping the two sources for the Clifford ritual nearby, while using the kingdom for your own benefits and goals, just as the Dark Triad did in the Spade Kingdom. And of course, you would need a spy or a middleman to keep in touch with the Spade Kingdom. The only one I can think of is Julius Novachrono, who controls the Clover Kingdom, just as the Dark Triad controls the Spade Kingdom. Julius also has time magic, just like the remaining ruler of the underworld, the Time Devil, and Julius was also the one who collected the two sources of the Clifford ritual and kept them both close to him at all times. It was Julius who sent Nacht to the Spade Kingdom. In every way, Julius Novachrono is just a perfect fit for this, considering that Nacht spied for Julius in the Spade Kingdom for about 8 years is very questionable. Why Julius never mentioned the danger of the devils when he should have warned his magic knights of such a great danger? As mentioned before, he pretended not to know that Asta's power came from a devil. He pretended not to understand the writing in Asta's grimoire, and above all, he pretended not to know about the existence of the devils. But right now, after he came back to life, he suddenly knew that Asta was indeed possessed by a devil and that the Spade Kingdom was ruled by devils. Obviously, Julius Novachrono did not have a chance to get all this information during the time he was presumed dead, because his informant Nacht was not there at the time either. So Julius always knew about Asta and the devils in the Spade Kingdom, but deliberately lied. There should already be enough to question any intentions and actions of Julius. It almost seems that Julius Novachrono deliberately did not want the Magic Knights to deal with the devils because the time has yet not come to introduce the subject, since the introduction of the devils might interfere with the preparations for the Clifford ritual. What is really interesting is that Julius suddenly introduced the whole devil plot after the reincarnation of the elves, at the very time when the Dark Triad was ready to operate. We know this because Zenon asked Dante why they waited for 6 months before kidnapping Yami and William. The only thing that happened 6 months ago was the reincarnation of the elves, the same moment that Julius Novachrono decided to reveal everything. And now, if we ask what preparations were necessary for the beginning of the Clifford ritual, we have to look at the requirements. Namely, Yami and William. Especially, William was very problematic to serve as the source of the Clifford ritual, because his body had to be separated from Patri's soul first. We know that William was needed for the ritual, but if Patri had exchanged his soul with William, he would have automatically destroyed the entire Clifford ritual, which had to be avoided at all costs. So the main goal of the first Black Clover saga, in the eyes of the devils, was to separate Patri's soul from William's body. But that's not the only suspicious thing about the elf reincarnation. The fact that Julius Novachrono, who normally should be able to easily defeat someone like Patri without even hurting himself, made it seem like he wanted the elf reincarnation to happen, because he knew about Patri and William all along and thus knew that this was a necessary thing to do for Patri's soul to separate from William's body. It at least seemed that way. Were it not for Julius again with his inner monologues questioning the intentions of Patri and the elves and making it almost obvious that he had nothing to do with the reincarnation of the elves. But if Julius is really in contact with the Time Devil, then his inner monologues don't really matter, because the one who might be controlling Julius and advise him on all his actions could be the Time Devil. Perhaps it was the Time Devil who manipulated Julius into doing this by giving him false promises and reasons. Regardless of the fact that the reincarnation and thus the separation of Patri's soul from William's body was necessary for the Clifford ritual, Julius still fought Patri, but on the condition that he did not try to hurt him. Of course, he can say he didn't want to hurt William simply because he's like a son to him, or perhaps he feels responsible for his actions, or maybe he knows that William is needed to create the Tree of Death, and therefore it is important not to hurt his body. Look at all he has done to protect William and not let him die or send him to prison. Julius put Glutre in prison for giving information to the Eye of the Midnight Sun about how to invade the Clover Kingdom, but William, who planned all this together with Patri, was not even convicted of a single crime, even though he was one of the leaders of the enemy organization. Heck, that man Rivici was still in prison for more than 2 years just for trying to steal a grimoire, while William was allowed to remain captain even though he had killed several people and was the leader of a terrorist organization that threatened every single life in the Clover Kingdom. Where is the justice in that? I know, Julius said that he needed as many magic knights as possible, but Glutre and Revici aren't weak either, and by that logic, the remaining members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun shouldn't have been captured either. After Julius was stabbed by Patri, he returned as a 13-year-old child, which suddenly left him unable to fight Zagreus, and unable to fight any other devil like Lucifera Magicula or Zenon's devil, not to mention the war in the Spade Kingdom. The question is whether he is really unable to fight any of these devils, or whether he tried to avoid fighting them because any devil would immediately recognize the time magic and Julius would risk losing his cover. We know that Julius can turn into any person he wants, which of course raises the question of whether Julius is really a child now, or has turned into a child to avoid any contact with the devils. we clearly saw how Julius was able to transform into an older form when he tried to stop the demon god, but then immediately lost that form. However, we have to consider that he might have sensed that Asta was close by and therefore turned back into a child. What exactly was the reason for Yuki Tabata bringing back Julius, who is now completely useless anyway? He simply undid a very dramatic death just because of the little information Julius had, which was completely unnecessary since Yuki Tabata could have used Nacht to reveal all that information, as he was the informant on all those devil things anyway. So Tabata could have left Julius dead without changing the plot. This raises the question of whether Julius's resurrection could have a deeper reason. We all know that Black Clover has the problem of letting characters die, but it's different with Julius because he was very useful in terms of information and plot direction right after his resurrection. So we can assume that there must be a deeper reason why he was left alive, a reason that we may not understand yet. Also, let's not forget that Julius has transformation magic. From what we know about transformation magic, it is not actually a magic in its own right, but rather a magical ability that comes with a certain magical properties. For example, Gray can use transformation magic, but it has been confirmed that the essence of a magic has nothing to do with transformation, but rather with transmutation. So this clearly confirms that the ability of transformation does not necessarily mean that one possesses transformation magic. The same goes for Rill, who has painting magic and thus has the ability to transform. So we can assume that this also applies to Julius Novachrono. The problem with this, however, is that apparently only certain types of magic can use transformation spells. Rill's magic can obviously create things, so it makes sense that he can transform himself. And Gray's magic generally has something to do with changing things, so it makes sense that she can transform as well. But time magic offers no logical explanation for why Julius can transform. So it looks like Julius has a second magical ability, but not transformation magic, but some other magical attribute that allows him to transform. And with that, there are only three possible options. Either Julius is a hybrid, his grimoire has been changed, or he's possessed by a devil. His grimoire is definitely not altered, so he is either possessed by a devil or is a hybrid. In summary, there is much to suggest that Julius may be possessed by the Time Devil and is somehow connected to the conspiracy to create the Clifford. This is indisputable. The only unanswered question is whether he is evil or not. From his inner monologues, it is clear that regardless to his intentions, he has one goal: justice. It should not be forgotten, however, that the inner monologues do not matter to a devil-possessed person if the devil who takes possession of them manipulates their hosts. Furthermore, Julius could somehow act unconsciously or possess some unconscious connection to the Time Devil. And finally, we should not forget that the typical main villain of a Shonen Jump battle manga is usually not really evil, but trying to create a better world by doing justified evil. In Black Clover, we have yet to discover that one main villain pulling all the strings in the background, and Julius is definitely a perfect candidate for that position. He is powerful and has political influence. His dreams that all beings can live together fairly without being discriminated against. So, what do you guys think? Could Julius be possessed by the Time Devil? And if so, do you think that he's evil? Let us know in the comments below. So that's it for today, folks. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. And we have to let you know that this video took a really long time for us to make, and it was a lot more hard work put into it than our other videos. It would be really helpful if you guys could subscribe, like, and share this video. And also, while you subscribe, don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you don't miss any of our future videos. So, see you guys in the next video. Yummy out.